Welcome again, everybody. Day 4, Build with Mapbox. We've got a great session for you today about advanced Mapbox styling in Mapbox Studio. Our senior map designer, James Piacentini, is going to walk us through some of the very cool things you can do with advanced styling. So we'll dig into that. But before we get started, just a few things to point out on Zoom. You probably know all this already, but I will go through a few things that you'd like to know, you may need to know. So first of all, this session is being recorded, as all of the sessions at Build. So you can see this session and others you may have missed later in the Zoom lobby where you started this session. So make sure to check that out. If you want captions, you can see those. There's a button that says CC at the bottom of your window, and you can choose captions in the language you need. So go ahead and turn that on if you like. And we will be taking questions during the session. So please use the Q&A feature. Just type your question in there, and we'll aim to get to your questions during the session. I think that's it from me. So James, again, this is James Piacentini, senior map designer. He's going to walk you through some things that you'd probably like to know, maybe you don't know. James, take it away.
Great, thanks so much. I'm gonna go ahead, and just, whoops, of course, sliding right into my studio. There we go. Hey everyone, my name is James Piacentini. I'm a senior map designer and cartographer here at Mapbox. I'm very excited to be here with you today and looking forward to sharing some of the amazing advanced tools and techniques we have available in our free platform, Mapbox Studio. We'll explore some fun color control, symbology, zoom and data-driven styling, layer management using slots, and some responsive and expressive data building as well. We have a lot to cover today, so I may go through some of these things pretty quickly. But as David mentioned, we will be recording these. You can always go back to that in the transcripts. So without further ado, let's hop right in. So I'm actually already here in my custom style. We're sort of building upon a pre-made base map where my colleague Mel had built for her session on Tuesday. And the goal for this is, we're working toward building a sort of hypothetical e-bike sharing app that's maybe starting up in Washington, D.C. That's sort of the premise of this style and some of the data layers we're going to be doing. So the way this base map has been styled is just within the actual built-in base map configs and controls. So there's a lot of customization that you can do right in there. And here, what we're going to do is then start adding some of our custom data layers. So how do we add custom data? Well, first thing we do is we go up to this big blue plus sign or hit N, which is the hotkey for that. We can click on that and go to custom layer. This is going to open the sort of custom data interface where we're now going to be able to bring in new data sources. I've conveniently pre-labeled all of the relevant layers with build today. So I'm actually just going to be able to go here to the source tab. You'll see if you click on this, you'll get links to all of your sources and new data layers that you might upload directly. I'm just going to type in build. And you'll see I've conveniently got these all here. So the first thing I probably want to do when thinking about building, an app like this is I might want to show my user where their location is. So I've gone ahead here and just built a simple data layer. In a real case, this might be, live data that's updated based on lat and long. In this case, I've just sort of baked in a static layer. It's called build user. And you'll notice the interface will update. It will show that data on the map. It'll let me know when it's visible. It'll also define a layer type. The system's pretty smart, so it knows that this is a point. It's going to recommend circle as a layer type. I could also, make this a symbol if I wanted to, but we'll keep it as a circle for now. So once we've decided that, we have the right layer, have the right data source, we can go up to the top here to the style pane. And that is going to return us to our map with our new layer added and give us, relevant customization options based on the layer type that we've chosen. So this user kind of like pin or puck, I probably want this to be on top of a lot of other data layers I'm going to add. So what I can do is down here in the kind of imports tab, you'll notice this might be closed normally. If you click this little arrow, you'll open up the layer slots. And this is basically a set of sort of places within the hierarchy where you can put your data to know kind of what it's going to sit above and what it's going to sit below. In this case, I'm going to bring this into the top slot. I want that to be above things like roads and buildings and POIs and things of that nature. So now I want to actually start styling it. And first thing I could just, go up and change the size of it. Maybe I want the radius of this to be 10. You'll see it updates right away live. Um, but if I zoom out, I'm thinking maybe that gets a little too big. I kind of want this to actually kind of match the styling and of the map and match the kind of zoom scaling of the map. So what I can do is go up here into the radius and actually click the style across zoom range. This will allow me to programmatically style these elements based on what zoom level I have on the map. So go ahead and click that. You'll notice it will default to give us kind of a minimum and maximum option. So zoom level 0 and 22. It'll also provide this really nice kind of UI graph here, this chart to sort of help us understand how we're mapping on these zoom levels. So I think when I'm zoomed out, that would be a lower zoom level. I probably want this dot to be a little bit smaller. And when I zoom in, that would be a higher zoom level. I want this dot to be a little bigger. So I can go ahead and start adjusting that. So let's say maybe at zoom level 13, I want this to be 5 pixels wide. You'll see this chart updates dynamically. And then maybe by zoom 16, I want this to go to, let's say, 12. So now as I zoom in and out, you'll see this dot is sort of scaling dynamically with the map, and it feels much more integrated into the map. Next, I want to style the color. So I can go in here and start, dragging this around. You'll notice that the UI as well as the data layer itself updates dynamically as I'm choosing this color. If I want a little more control up here at the top, I can switch from the disk view to the values, and that'll give me, much more fine control for HSL values, RGB, etc. I can really, adjust these specifically. And I'll head back to the disk because I like this a little bit better. And I like a sort of, maybe a bluish color. I tend to work with hex. I have a set of hex values that I like. So I'm going to use a color that I think looks good, a sort of a bluish color. So I'll type this in. And there we go. You'll see it updates right away. I quite like that. Now, maybe I also want to give this a stroke or an outline. And I can do that directly here as well. First, I'll set maybe the stroke width. So I'll determine how thick this outline is. So, if I made this, 10, for example, you see it'd be quite thick. I'm going to set this maybe, I'm going to style this by zoom as well, because maybe I want that size of that outline to kind of scale dynamically with the dot as well. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll set this to 13, maybe it'll be 1 pixel wide. And then at 16, maybe I'll set that to 5. And I'll also make this a blue, maybe a lighter blue. So I'll use the hex code that I know as well. Let's make sure I get that right. There we go. So it's kind of a lighter blue. Might be a little difficult to see, but basically what I've done now is given this sort of a light blue outline that also scales with zoom level. Again, just helping this custom layer feel a little bit more integrated into the map. And with that, we've got our, your location pin. Great. Now let's start adding our actual bike data, our e-bikes. So I'll go back to add new layer, custom layer. I'll go back to the sources and I'll type in build again because I know that's what I'm looking for. And you'll see I have a layer here pre-built called build e-bikes. So I'll add that. You'll see the interface updates, dynamically as well. And it'll show me, okay, this is the data, right? These are my points for where the bikes might be located. And in this case, I'm going to go to a symbol layer because I actually want to style these. I might want these to be little bike icons or something like that. So I'll set that to symbol layer and we'll go back to the style pane. I'm also going to bring this into my top slot, but maybe just below the user pane, the user dot here. And you'll notice there's nothing on the map yet. And that's because I haven't actually told Studio, what icon I want, what symbol I want, what text I want. So you'll see with the symbol layer, we get some different options, right? We have 4 kind of high level categories here with the text, icon, position, and placement. And within each of those, we'll get sort of different specific controls. I'll start with the icon, and I'm going to choose an icon I want. Studio comes preloaded with a handful of, key SVG icons, but you can also upload your own custom images to style, whether, using the add or remove images button here or up at the top, the images pane. You can go in here and upload SVGs that you have and start using those right away. So let's just test this out with like the bicycle icon. So cool, now we've got our bikes. And what's really great about this is not only can I choose a custom icon, but because these are SVG files, Studio can actually detect which colors are being used and allow me to change those dynamically. For all of our pre-built icons, you'll get a background and a stroke. And for custom icons that you bring in, you'll also get, if there are different colors, might be color one, color two, color three, etc. So I go ahead and change the background, right? If I want these bikes to be red and maybe I want maybe kind of a yellow outline or something, you know, not looking exactly the way I want, but if I had a certain branded tone, right, I could customize this exactly the way I want. But rather than use these pre-built icons, we've actually gone ahead and designed some of our own custom icons for our branded application. And I want to use those. But what I want to do is actually style that according to a sort of data condition relevant to those bikes. So I'm going to have e-bikes that are fully charged. I'll have e-bikes that are partially charged. I'll have e-bikes that are empty. And I want to actually use a different icon for each of those. And within Studio, you can do that using what's called style with data conditions. So here in the icon pane, in the image tab, which is going to tell Studio what actual image to show, I'll go to style with data conditions. And I'm going to go ahead and select this attribute called range num. Now I have the range attribute here, and you'll see that's listed right middle, full, low, empty. Range num is just a number value that I've associated with each of those. So 1 is empty, 4 is full. I'm going to use that just because it's a little bit easier. And so I'll go ahead and click that, and you'll see at the top here, it's now helping me to start build this logic, right? So it's saying the data field, range num, and in this case, we could choose if we want it to, exist or be greater than or less than. I'm going to keep it as is, and I'll set that to 1, which basically means, okay, if the data point has the range number value of 1, then use this icon. Great, and now we see those. They're a little bit big. I'll rescale them after I get everything in the map. I can go down, and like I mentioned before, right, you'll see I could change the colors of these. In fact, I probably want to change the color of this one because these are my empty bikes. So I might want to show them as like a red color, for example. So I can just go in here to the screen, this color one, and start changing that dynamically. And I'll use a hex code that I like as well. So a sort of pinkish, salmonish red. Great. And I'll click done. And now what I can do is I can just keep going through and adding additional data conditions. So we'll say for data condition 2, which is my low bike, I'll set it to the low range icon and go down and click done. And I'll go through and do that for the rest of these. So for number 3, that'll be the mid-range bike. Do that. And then I'll add one more. Number 4, that's the high range bike. Great. Now you might notice this fallback value that won't be relevant quite yet. We'll get to that in a little bit. That basically says, if there are any data conditions that I haven't specified, let's say I had a range num of 5 or 6 or 7, those will all default back to this fallback value. I don't have any of those for this particular data layer, so we don't really have to worry about it. So now that I've gone through these, let's go ahead and resize them. Maybe I want to resize these by zoom as well. I really like to scale things by zoom. I think it just helps icons look really nice on the map. So let's see, from zoom 13, these are pretty big. So I'm going to shrink them down, maybe 0.3. And then by zoom 18, we'll set this to, let's say, 0.6. Now you can see as we zoom in and out, these sort of, again, scale to feel sort of contextual in the map. The one other thing I want to do with these is maybe add a label. In addition to the icon, I want to let someone just read some text really quickly to say, okay, this is empty, this is full, etc. So I can go over to the text pane and I can set this text field. Now you could build, any kind of, custom logic you want here. I could set this to attributes. I could set this to, any number of things. In this case, I'm actually just going to set this directly to that data field called range, which I've already conveniently labeled with what I want these kind of labels to show. So I'll just set that directly equal to range. You see it'll build this little formula for me, just doing this toString just to make sure that what it's pulling is a string and getting that range value. Now, these are obviously in need of a little bit of styling. So let's go ahead and customize these as well. I think the first thing I want to do is probably move their position. I'd like these labels to be, centered, but a little bit below the icon. So I can do that pretty easily by going here into the position tab, and you'll see we get tons of controls in here, right? For anchors, translations physically. You can do that with icons, with the text, etc. In this case, I'm going to do the text offset, which again is going to tell Studio kind of where to push or offset this text. And I'm going to go ahead and style this also by zoom because I want this to scale properly. And we'll say maybe from 13, we'll click here. We'll set the Y value maybe to 1.5. You'll see that drops down. And then by 18, we'll set that Y value to 2. You'll see now as we move, right, those will kind of fit and scale as well. So that kind of space between the text and the icon will grow kind of naturally as well. Great, I think that's looking really nice. Now I'll probably want to go through and adjust the size and the color and the font as well. So let's adjust the size, also by zoom level, by zoom range, which we love to do. And we'll go ahead and use those same values. So at zoom 13, maybe we want this to be 12. And at zoom 18, we'll leave it to size 16, right? So that's looking a lot better now. I think those are really fitting well on the map. Um, and I could change the font to anything. I actually quite like Open Sans, so I might leave it as that. But if I have other custom fonts in here that I might like, I could change it to that. Poppins, for example. Any font that you might add. I'm going to go back. I'm actually going to just clear that back to Open Sans because I like the way that looks. And the last thing I want to do is change the color. I actually want to match the color of these, I think, to the icons. I think that'll look really, really nice. So again, rather than just doing, one color, I can also go ahead and style this with data conditions. And we'll use the same logic, range num. And remember, 1 is equivalent to the empty. So I'll go to 1, and I'll set that to this empty value, right? This red, or this kind of pinkish. And now here's where this fallback value comes in handy. Because all the rest of the icons are using this green, rather than manually going through and setting each of those as green, I could just set the fallback value to green, and it's going to apply to all of them. So it's just a great way to save a little bit of time if this is sort of the situation you're in. So let's change that. We'll use this color, which is that, and great. Now we've got all of those with that green color. And I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe the text is a little difficult to read. So I might want to maybe add an outline to that. So one thing we can do in here is go down to the bottom here and we have the option to add a text halo. So kind of an outline around your text. So I'll go ahead and maybe add a halo of 2 pixels and let's set that to white. So it's subtle, but it gives them a little bit more kind of legibility on the map. And I think that's looking really, really nice. Now, before I move forward, one thing I might want to test is how this looks in night mode. For example, let's say, our user is looking for a bike in the evening and they have their phone at night mode. So it'll be a darker map background. How are these icons going to look? So I go into the base map, into my regular kind of standard customization. And I go ahead and reset this light preset here. Let's change that to night and see what happens. And so the base map changes to this really elegant night mode, but our custom layers haven't really updated. So it's looking a little jarring. It's not necessarily legible in the way we want it to. So when you set these kind of light presets, all of the base map elements are tied to that. Custom layers are not tied to that by default, but we can control that and manually add them in. So you always have the flexibility and control to do what you'd like. First thing I might want to do here is, I noticed that my user pin is pretty dark. So one way to deal with that is by using a control called emissive strength. Emissive strength basically sort of controls the intensity of the light that applies to this element. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe test that. Let's put that up to 1. Okay, great. So now it's sort of getting a lot more brightness. I think that might be too bright actually. So let's try that maybe a 0.8. I think that's nice. Now, this usually has much less effect during the lighter light presets like day, but before I just lock into this, I want to double test that. I want to make sure it's not going to mess up how it looks during the day. And I think it still looks good. So I'm feeling pretty confident that I can leave that as a single value rather than, style it by that light preset. But with these icons, what I want to do is actually build in some logic so the systems of Studio will know to basically change their appearance based on the light preset, if it's daytime or nighttime. And I'm going to start with the icon, with the labels, excuse me. It's a little bit easier. So go into color. And what you might notice at the bottom of each of your kind of attribute stylings, next to the mouse button, there's this little icon here that says Edit JSON. If you click on that, it'll open a basically like a text, a JSON editor. And what this is doing is sort of exposing the underlying styling code that is mirroring the effect that these kind of drag and drop UI elements are doing. So they kind of update dynamically, one to the other. And you can actually just build logic directly here into the code rather than needing to drag and drop here if you're more comfortable with that. So I'm actually going to build some simple logic in here to say, look for the light preset. If it's nighttime, make the icons one color. If it's daytime, make them another. But I don't actually want to change the text color. I think what I actually want to do is just change the halo color. So I like the green and pink text. Maybe I just want a darker halo. So I'll go to halo color and I'll build that logic in here. Right now it's simple. It's just white. And I'm going to go ahead in here and start building an expression. And you'll notice it will, kind of give you a warning if your expression isn't correct. So you can kind of, check yourself live. So I'm going to go ahead and start coding. It's very simple. So I'll start with the brackets and I'm going to build a logic based around a match condition. So type in match, which is basically going to tell the system to look for a particular value that matches in, whatever kind of configuration I'm calling. If it matches, output one value. If it doesn't match, output another. So the thing I want to look for is that light preset configuration. So I'll create more brackets, type in config, the name of that config, light preset. Then I have to specify that this is part of the base map and not part of this custom layer. So let it know this is a base map configuration that I'm calling. And now I need to tell it, okay, what is the value I'm supposed to match? And the values that we're looking for in this case, right, are night and dusk. So what we've built right now is basically a condition that says if the light preset configuration matches night or dusk, output this value. Otherwise, output this other value. So now I can determine what I want those things to be. In this case, I want it to be say, dark gray, maybe something like that. And then during the day, we'll just put it back to, right, that to white. So what's that? Something like that. Great. And I have to make sure that I have this typed in right. There we go. And you'll get this valid input here to let you know you've done it right. You might see a warning like this. Sometimes this property value is incompatible with the features. All that means is the custom logic that I've built here in the JSON extends beyond what you can do directly with the UI interface. So there isn't necessarily a button right now that I can toggle for this custom layer, but the logic can still be built out. The expression still works. So let's see if this works now. So let's go ahead and close that. And let's test. If I go back to daytime, what I should see is the halo around the text turning to white. And it works. Great. So now we've built that simple logic, right? Again, using this kind of config match expression. And I think that looks much, much better. While we're here, I might also go ahead and update the text in this of strength slightly, right? Just give it a little bit more brightness. I think that's looking good. So now for something a little bit more fun and a little bit more complicated. So you might recall, right, as we built out our logic for what icons appear based on these data conditions. And within each of those, right, we were able to individually style these colors. So what I think I want to do is build a similar logic, right, where we can determine certain attributes based on if it's night preset and certain attributes if it's based on the day preset. But I want to also not just change maybe the icons, I want to change these color values dependent on that. And that's something we can do again in this JSON editor. It'll be a little bit more complicated. And I think what I might want to do is maybe invert these colors. So maybe what I want is during night mode, the kind of background of the circle will be black and the bike will be white. And then it will return to this condition during the day. So let's jump back into the JSON editor and start building that. And now you see, right, because I have some logic here, when I jump into the JSON editor, it's already got that code kind of pre-built in there for us. And we're going to start adjusting this to fit the needs that we've just said. So we're going to start by adding that initial um, match condition, right? So we want to set this to build in that config logic around light presets. So go ahead and add new brackets. Now, this second bracket, I'm actually going to put way down at the bottom because this whole thing is kind of going to be nested in that. But let's go ahead and build that initial light preset logic first. So we'll do match. And now again, we need to tell it what we're trying to match, right? So we're matching that config light preset. Oops. And we want to make sure it's a basement config, right? We want to make sure it knows that. Put a comma there. And then again, we're telling it what to match. Oops. So we're saying if those match night or dusk, then output the next condition, otherwise output the following condition, right? So basically, this is all set up to determine whatever the next input is going to be the kind of styling during the night mode. And then if I were to add a copy of that, that's basically the styling during the day mode. Before we jump into all of that, I'm going to clean this up a little bit because we're going to be adding a lot more of these color parameters and things like that, right? Remember, this is the customization to change the empty from a green to a red. So we're going to kind of be like copying that throughout. But before we do that, I'm going to just clean this up a little bit. I'm actually going to switch this internal logic from a match to a step. And you'll see why in a little bit. This is just going to help simplify some of the code as we go through. And I can actually, with that, delete this sort of first value, which is great. And I can delete these brackets, saves a little bit of space. Essentially, what we're doing is jumping from sort of like a data condition right to a sort of like a data step, and we're just going to give it discrete values of if it's one, if it's two, if it's three, it's four, and it always sort of starts at the initial value, so we can actually get rid of the one there. We don't need it. So again, just saves a little bit of time with the coding there. And we can also get rid of these quotations here, which is the fallback value, sort of the none. So we'll get rid of that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this full sort of expression, right? And I'm going to actually just copy this. So right now, this is the what to do at night and dusk. Then it'll be comma. And the next thing that happens is what to do during the day. So add that one here. So this is basically telling it what to do during the day. And since it's already styled for the day, this one we can actually leave as is. We don't even have to change it. We can just go up and sort of change this first set, basically saying during the night mode, I want you to change, the dark color to white color and vice versa. So we can go through and start building that out for each of these, right? So we'll start with the bike icon one, which is the empty. It's already set the outline to be red. I'm going to go ahead and add a few more parameters here. So in this case, we're going to add color 2. Oops, the dash there. And I'm going to set that to this white. And then color 3, we're going to set that to a sort of dark gray, let's say. So now what we've told this to do, right, is say, grab this icon, switch the outline to red, switch the background to to white and switch the bike icon to a dark color. That's not going to update until I fix all the brackets and everything here. You'll see it'll kind of tell me that I'm missing some brackets along the way. But once we get all this set up, it should lock into place. Now we've done that. Let's go ahead and build up the same logic for these other icons. So I'm going to kind of copy this whole thing in here, right? So now, and add this to number two, right? So two is low, the low range bikes. So I'm going to add another bracket here. And this bracket is actually going to go down here at the bottom because I need to also specify the image and then the parameters. So we're going to follow this logic that we've already built here. So we'll do image, low range bike, excuse me. And then we'll just grab this whole parameters and drop that in there. And we'll update the colors to match this other icon. So we don't want, a red, we want to keep that green, right? So we'll go ahead and drop this. And in this case, actually, the darker color is color 4. That was something, I looked at earlier, right? Because this has a little gray outline. So this is something, if you're going into the icons, you just want to double check it's using the right ones. Great. And then I'll do the same thing for 3. So should just go ahead and let's copy this in as well. Kind of remember to move the brackets properly, excuse me. So here we'll do, right, image. It's grabbing the mid-range bike image, and then it's going to change these parameters. Give me one sec, make sure this is, oops, there we go. Image, mid-range bike. And in this case, it's the same, this color 2, color 4. And then lastly, for this high range bike. So one more time. And we'll do image, image, high range bike, and then drop in these color changing parameters as well. Oops, I missed this curly bracket. We want to make sure we get all of that. There we go. And in this case, it actually is, it's color 3 here. So we should have that set up for our night mode. And like I said, the rest of this is actually set up for the day mode. It should already be looking good. And we just want to double check, right, that we have everything in place. You might just have an extra comma in there and boom. So it's a lot of brackets, and it's great that Studio will tell you and make sure you're missing commas and brackets and all of that. But again, this whole expression is basically said, if it's night mode, change these icons to have dark backgrounds and light bikes. Otherwise, keep them as light backgrounds and dark bikes. So all of that is now in place. Let's see if it looks good. Let's see if it works. So we'll swap over to day, and we'll see we have our bright icons working exactly as intended. And go back to night, and they're working exactly as intended. Perfect. So with that, we've done the bulk of the styling for our icons, like I said, there's a lot more additional kind of controls that we can do, positions and placements and things like that. We don't have time to go through all of that. So we're just kind of doing some of the highlights here, but I think these are looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with them. And maybe as part of this, one thing I want to do, maybe showing my user who's using this application, they might want to know, let's say, which bikes are within a 10-minute walk for me, right? I want to be able to, I see all of these bikes on the map, but I want to be able to know which ones are within 10 minutes because that's as far as I want to walk. So, you could use something like an isochrone layer for that, for example, which is a type of spatial data polygon that basically, maps out kind of what the walkability or drivability is according to like the street network within a certain time or distance, right? We actually have a Mapbox isochrone API that we can use to, achieve this. And we also have a great playground. So Mapbox isochrone API playground. So if you search that, you'll be able to actually build your own isochrones in your browser and test it. It's quite fun. I've already gone ahead and done that. So I'm actually going to add this isochrone layer. So again, I'm going to type in build, and you'll see I have this layer build 10-minute ISO. I'll plop that on. It'll show me that it's working. So this is basically from the your location pin where you can walk in 10 minutes. And it'll set to a fill layer, right? It's pretty smart. It knows that this is a polygon, so it should probably be a fill. And let's go back to style and get going. Now, probably don't like it just ending up looking like this. I want this to be below my pins, right? So I'm going to drag this into the middle slot, actually. So my pins are now showing above it. And I'm going to change the color. Maybe this will be like a green or something. And maybe it's, opaque, something like that, or a little bit transparent, like that. That's kind of looking nice. Um, but I kind of like the idea maybe of like exposing the road network underneath this. So let me see what this looks like if I actually drag this into the bottom slot. Yeah, I kind of like that. I think that's a little bit more interesting, right? To actually show the network. But it's a little hard to see the outline now. So maybe I want to create like a polyline around it. But it's very, very easy to do. I can just select this layer and go up here to duplicate. I can just duplicate that. And maybe I'll drag that one back into the middle slot. And I want this to be an outline, right? Not a fill. So I can go back up to the select data pane, right? And I can just switch that data type to a line. And Studio's really smart. It'll basically say, hey, you're switching to a different layer type. Do you want me to match the styling as best I can? I'll say, yep, match it. I like that color. I like that green. And go back to our style pane. And now we have this outline. It's a little difficult to see. So maybe I'll make that width of 5, make that a little bit more visible. And there we go. That's kind of nice. So now I have this sort of isochrone, right? This outline showing my users, hey, these are all of the bikes that you can get to within a 10-minute walk from where you are. Now, now that I've kind of shown my user which ones are close, I might want to allow them to navigate to those. Maybe they want to say, okay, show me the walkability, the route to all of those, and maybe I'll select one of those paths and then get a navigation to it. So what we could do is build another data layer, right? That is basically we'll sort of select or filter out only the bikes within this polygon, and then we'll generate route lines to them. Now I have sort of pre-built that layer as well. So let's go ahead and add that layer. That'll be a line layer. So we'll go back to our sources, type in build again, and we'll go to this build paths, build bike paths. And you'll see it'll again kind of preview our layers for us. And you see we've got these route lines generated. And it'll, it's smart and knows that these should be lines. Great. So let's go ahead and start styling that as well. Now, this I think I'll put in the middle layer as well. So I'm going to drag that into the middle layer. And you'll see when I click on this line layer, right, we got tons of options in here, right? We can, change the edges, the caps, the kind of join corners. We have the option to turn this into a dash line and all those kinds of things. We won't necessarily show that today because we don't quite have time, but just to let you know, there's a lot of customization, a lot of control you can get with every layer type here. Couple quick styling things I want to set up here. So I'll go through these as quickly as I can. I don't necessarily like these lines being visible at such low zoom levels. Maybe I want these to only pop in at a higher zoom. So I'm gonna adjust the opacity by zoom, and we'll say maybe 14. These are actually completely hidden, and maybe 14.5 they become visible. So you'll see now as I zoom in, I get that kind of nice quick fade, and I think that's looking quite nice. I'll set the width to 5. I think it'll make them a little bit easier to see. And I'll, maybe I want to also kind of style color effect on them for some reason. Maybe like I want to show closer bikes as a green line and farther bikes as a red line, for example. Um, but before I go ahead and do that, I want to touch on one other thing really quickly. And that is that we've added quite a lot of interactivity directly into Studio as well. So maybe what I want to do is allow a user to, hover over one of these lines and change its qualities, make it, thicker, for example. So I can do that by selecting this line, and I can go up here to this icon, this interaction icon. When I click that, you'll see this layer gets a kind of a new sublayer called a state. And that state is sort of a secondary styling condition that will trigger when some interaction occurs. In this case, I'll set that interaction here using this preview interaction to hover. So when a mouse hovers over these lines, it will change its state in some way. And I think maybe in this case, I'll make them a bit thicker. So you'll see now, as I hover over these, they'll actually change to that thicker state, which is great. Last thing I want to do, like I said, is maybe change their color based on some sort of data range so that they'll be, green if it's a shorter distance and red if it's a farther distance. So I can go into the color here on this layer, and instead of doing style data conditions, I'll do style across data range. And in this case, I'll use the length, which is already, pre-calculated for us. I'll click that. And again, it'll start, it'll give us the lowest and highest values and give us this little chart. Now, these are, very precise geometries. We don't quite need all these extra, digits. So I'm just going to simplify that. So from maybe 0.28 to 0.86. And maybe I want to add like a middle stop, it'll go right in the middle. Maybe I want it to be like green to yellow to red or something like that. I kind of like that idea. So let's go ahead and add some colors. I have a few that I like here. It'll be starting green. That'll then jump to maybe a sort of a yellow. Again, these are just hex codes that I kind of know and like to use. And then a sort of reddish color. That should be good. There we go. Great. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and hide these isochrone layers. So click on them and go up to hide, just because we probably might not want to show that to a user when we're routing them anymore. Um, One thing you might notice now is I have to style the state separately, right? The state is still, the hover state is still saying, hey, switch these back to a black line. And I want them to maintain their color. So, rather than going through that whole thing, data range, and typing that all in again, I can actually just go into this color, swap over to the JSON, and just copy this code, go into my state, and plop it right in. And there you go. So now that state condition knows keep the colors, just change the line thickness. And with that, we've basically got, our kind of whole app. We've got our user location, we've got our bikes, we've got routing to the nearest bikes. One last thing we might want to do is control how these appear in kind of 3D physical space. Now you notice we zoom in, let's get in here into this kind of 3D environment. You'll notice two things. One, these lines sort of hide behind buildings, and two, these icons sort of float in front of buildings. And that's due to where we've set them in our layers. So we can just make one final adjustment. That's to the occlusion opacity. And that's actually going to determine how transparent these lines are based on their relation to 3D objects. So and go in the bike layer. We'll go to occlusion opacity here. Set that to something like zero point 0.4. And you'll see that these are now kind of partially obscured, but still showing behind those buildings. So we get, a better sense of kind of like visibility in 3D space if we're navigating someone to that. And with that, we've kind of styled everything we want. In this case, we're probably ready to go ahead and launch this. So, the last thing we want to do is just, maybe publish our style and get it out into the world. With that, I know I'm a little bit short on time. I'm going to absolutely just wrap up with my little last second spiel here, which is that, there are so many additional ways to customize these layers. We've truly, truly just scratched the surface. And, you've seen I've had to, really be as diligent as I can with going through these quickly because there's so much fine grain control with every layer type in Studio. It's pretty amazing actually how much you can do directly in this interface, and even more by tapping into our SDKs. So it's just a taste of what's possible in Studio today, and we're always working on more exciting additional customizations in the future. So with that, thank you so much. Happy to take some questions here toward the end.
James, that
Thanks.
was very, very cool. We have some great questions,
Great.
and I'm going to ask them in the order we got them. Some design ones, some sort of framework questions, and then
Mhm.
usability one. So you showed us how to change the appearance of objects on the map based on the map style, like day or night. And the question is, if you have a custom map layer, like a satellite layer, it's always in the app, but sometimes it's hidden. At runtime, the user can choose which view they want.
Mhm.
And Jonathan wants to know, is it possible to style based on the appearance or the, whether a custom layer is hidden or visible? Can you change how the icons appear based on that attribute?
So in that case, is it saying based on the visibility of one layer, change the
Yes.
conditions of another?
Yep.
Um, yes, that is doable. That is a little bit, I don't know if we can do that directly here in Studio. At runtime, you could build out logic like that. So you could say, you could build out, a functionality where, the user has the ability to toggle on and off a certain layer. And when that interaction occurs, trigger certain other effects, including change other layers.
Okay. Cool. We've got another question that's more of a design question for you. Tim is showing cost of living data at state and country neighborhood levels,
Mhm.
and he's interpolating using light to dark gradients to communicate, the different values, cost of living ranges, and so on. But at these boundaries between different areas, when the values are kind of close, it's hard to distinguish between the different values. And he wants to know, do you have any recommendations on ways to improve styling or ideas on alternate implementations to show this data in a more clear way?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways to think about styling data layers. I mean, one thing that I always try and think about is balancing the sort of like cohesive style while also trying to make sure certain elements that I really want to stand out are a little bit punchier. So one thing to do is sort of, make certain elements a bit more dynamic, add more saturation, really like make them feel like they sort of exist maybe on top of that base map or on top of other layers. Um, Other options, right, are, working with transparencies or overlays, testing different color ramps, for example, if you're using it as kind of like a gradient. We think a lot of like GIS software often defaults to kind of like maybe blue to orange or red to green as a gradient, but testing, other potential gradients or having multiple stops along the way. So, like, for example, rather than just doing a green to a red, having a yellow in between, I could have added purple or something like that to create more dynamism there. And the other option is always just go online or go out in the world and just look at cool maps, just spend all day looking at cool maps and get inspired. There's so many amazing examples that you can find of, users of ours on our website, that really showcase some really brilliant sort of like design sensibilities.
Good idea. Okay, the last one, second to last one, is there a way to check accessibility after you apply emissive strength settings?
Um, by accessibility, do you mean like in terms of colors that work for people with different visibility abilities, like if they're colorblind, for example, or um, is it more focused on like accessing those
Yeah,
layers in the map?
Leslie just said yes, it is for, color perception, colorblind,
Yes. So within
contrast.
our um, now, I've got to find it because I know, yes, great. So within the settings within Studio, there is a color blindness simulator here where you can actually apply a number of different filters based on different types of color blindness. And it will update your, map style and your colors to, align with that. Now, in this case, this is a pretty generally faded map style, so some of the colors might not be jumping out so much. But yes, this is one great way to be able to kind of test what these elements might look like to someone with these different kind of color blindness conditions. I also always recommend, I'm of course forgetting the name of it now, but there are accessibility guidelines for web interfaces and colors and fonts and things like that. So always look to those and make sure you're kind of within those guidelines.
Very good. I think we're right at time. So thank you very much, James, for a very informative session on how to style. We had some great questions too. Um, I really appreciate all the info, and thanks
Yeah,
everyone for joining. It's been a great session. Please catch us on the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just right before we go, one last thing I would say, highly recommend checking out our APIs and docs pages, our documentation pages. There's so much incredible information on there, tutorials, resources, just to really help you get started and help you dive as deep as you want. So definitely check that out.
Cool. Thanks for joining us,
Great.
guys.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Take care.